Hi, I'm Tim, he's August, and welcome to Watches Tonight. This evening we are talking about hype watches and some of the best alternatives you can select instead. We're also going to chat live and I share your wrist shots tonight on Watches Tonight. August, why don't you lead us through our first round of wrist shots?
Sure, absolutely. So we have a friend from California who is celebrating a new MB&F Legacy machine. 101 there, beautiful Fume blue dial. Have a iconic wishbone design there from MB&F. That's of course one that you want to always see from the brand. I love how this design is very horology forward. I love that it's not its first purpose necessarily to tell you the time, but a really fantastic watch.
And then we got Craig M, who rolls in his Porsche 911 GT3 with his Rolex Submariner. Looking good there. Good taste in both cases. We got Phil from Park City. Kills it with the H. Moser Streamliner Alpine Drivers Edition. That is the one to own. Reggie V, an old friend of the channel, shares the Rolex Daytona sourced from Will at the 1916 company. Sharath and his Patek 5059 retrograde officer's watch perpetual calendar report from the Helix en route to the Marina Bay Sands at Marina Bay, Singapore. And Wakar picks up a new strap for his AP Royal Oak Offshore chronograph in Las Vegas. Looking good. I love the new quick release system, makes it a lot more friendly. By the way, while we're warming up, do me a favor, follow me on Instagram, Tim_Masso. All sorts of fun stuff. You're going to learn a little bit more about the parking lot of miniature cars behind us today, watches that I've weighed, and 1-minute videos of everything I'm reviewing. So check out Tim_Masso on Instagram. Okay, alternatives to hype watches. Let's face it, there's a lot of great watches available at or below list prices, 24 hours a day and 365 days a year. But instead of branching out to find value, we withdraw into our social media echo chambers where maybe 3 to 4 different brands and 10 to 12 models seem to be the entire world. Unfortunately, this is the cause of many collectors leaving the hobby and cause for others to avoid it altogether. We can do better than this as a community. While I stock all the hype watches you're going to see in today's show, nevertheless, I've made it clear they're rarely my style or on my wrist. This is interactive, so feel free to weigh in. We're going to read your comments and we're going to talk about the alternatives to hype watches. August, you've been in watch retail now for a couple of years. You came from our Denver location and you worked at the AD side initially. Tell me, what is a hype watch to you? How do you define this term?
I think that they are watches that have transcended the medium themselves. The idea of a Veblen good comes to mind, where it's a watch or an item that is no longer taken at face value. You know, the intrinsic things that might associate with value with the watch, it's no longer really paid attention to, but more so it's standing in popular culture. It could be things like music, appearances in movies, on a red carpet, and so they sort of take on a larger than life personality, and some people might be after them for no other reason other than they understand that it's popular.
So basically, you're fighting with people who are not watch collectors because it's penetrated the mainstream mindset, and so it's going to be on mainstream media, it's going to be on all sorts of music and arts and entertainment influencer pages that have nothing to do with watches. All of a sudden, you're fighting with people outside the community for access. And Veblen goods, it's a good way to describe it. The more they cost, the more people seem to want them. So before we jump any deeper into this concept, let's acknowledge our live audience. We've got Moto Gunner from Athens, Georgia, Jim Millett from the UK, Arto Shaw from New York, Sutat, and Enrique Cassiano joining in on a live stream from a steel mill. I'd love to hear more about that. We have I Want to Watch, who's joining in. Ordinary 999, Stand Up Late in Norway. We Are Venom joining in, another good friend. We have Furion Survivor joining from Sydney, Australia. Sydney's in tonight's show, by the way. We got Dr. Kevin Moore, microbiologist, Goldfinger Marquez from Brooklyn, Slowboy Fuel Pump, and we got Sashi joining in with Stephen E., who's also in the episode, and Karsten from Montreal. Welcome to one and all. Okay, so let's start with like the original hype watch, the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Jumbo. Even the basic 16202 ST now is not exactly accessible, new or used.
Right.
So what are people hearing at the boutique when they go in and ask for one of these? Because you've had to have this discussion, and there's a right way and a wrong way to have this discussion.
Right, so I mean, in Denver, in my experience, we were not authorized dealers of Audemars Piguet. So this was one that I was more fielding on the pre-owned side.
But when someone wants a watch he can't get, or there's a wait list, how do you let him down lightly?
You know, I think that there's a lot of ways to do it. I think the appropriate way would be to discuss expectations from the get-go, to let people know that there is an incredible amount of demand around a watch, and it might be good to have multiple paths in mind in terms of how to check off a certain box within a collection. That there's almost never one watch to satisfy one certain craving unless it is something that is all about the hype.
Okay, so if we want something that's a period peer and a class peer to the Royal Oak Jumbo, tell me a little bit about the Laureato.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, as you said, period correct in its design heritage. You get it hits a lot of the same marks: classic stainless steel, integrated bracelet, variations of finishing. You do have a brand that is historically significant, maybe not quite to the same degree that we look at AP, but even down to the texture of the dial, proportions of the bezel, proportions of the case and bracelet overall, at a glance, they do fill a very, very similar spot in terms of aesthetic.
And you're going to be getting a very realistic deal here. I mean, let's face it, 1975 Laureato, 1972 the Royal Oak, they're plank owners from the period. Lots of different dial colors, 38mm or 42, ceramic or steel, precious metal if you want it. And most importantly, on the standard 42, 100-meter water resistance, something you do not get unless you step up to an Offshore at Audemars Piguet. 42mm steel in-house, 100 meters, really good looking watch, well loomed, retail of $14,300, but you're going to be able to get this under $10,000 all day long as a used watch. Am I right there?
Totally. I think it's a great value.
So a good value whether you buy it new or used. And again, no one can claim that this is some latter-day Royal Oak emulator. It's been there since the beginning, and actually 1 year earlier than the Nautilus. So Chopard Alpine Eagle, this is the watch we all underestimated in 2019. What's it got going on?
There's definitely, you're taking a step away, I think, from Royal Oak necessarily. I'm seeing a lot of, there's an Hublot similarity there. Kind of got the two ears reminiscent of the sides to a porthole, which we see in a lot of other watches. I think that not a true California dial, but that mixture of index, hour markers, and Roman numerals is really cool.
So it's neither a pure stick index dial nor a true Roman dial. You've got that hybridization that you would get with a California.
Absolutely.
A really cool watch on a lot of levels. A very modern update of the St. Moritz from the early 1980s. 41 in steel, COSC certified. This is another 100-meter watch. It's got a real standout dial, and I think what matters here is that it's textured. It's not just some brushed grain like you'll find on, say, a Sunburst. This is something you can imagine it having a tangible texture if you could touch the dial with your finger. What do you think about the price? $15,500 new. Obviously, pre-owned will be lower.
Yeah, I think that it's well slotted within what it's trying to be. I think that there's a lot of competition because you do have, the Laureato most notably is going to be that competition where it's obvious what you're trying to do here with a 70s inspired sport watch. I think that with the Laureato having a bit more true heritage within the design, I think that this being a premium on top of that might not make sense to me personally, but I do think that it's generally fair for what they're asking.
I would also say this, the Alpine Eagle absolutely kicks the butt of every bracelet on Earth. Not because it has more features necessarily, but because of the way it's built. This is as tough as a battleship anchor. There is no lateral play. The solidity, the weight, oh my God, it feels expensive. I'll also say the Alpine Eagle is great because you can spend as much as you want, and if you really want to throw the bone-cracking blow at an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, go out and buy like something like the XPS 41 with a micro rotor and a Geneva Hallmark certification and a steel case. You can get the Cadence high frequency if you want something that's really tech-oriented with the ceramized case they just came out with this year. So there's a lot of options and different sizes. Sartori Biard SB07, discontinued but worth seeking if you want something from a small brand and you want to know the person whose name is on the dial. You'll have a real relationship even if you buy this pre-owned. Let Armand know and you'll be part of the family. A great company, great people, a great product. Hard to get with a lot of variations because almost all the dials were done custom, but worth seeking out. Now let's take a look at who's in the box now. We got Steven, who's looking at the Bulgari Octo. We've got Jim Millett saying hi to Junior Johnson. That's always great. Junior Johnson from Michigan. It's great when our UK audience knows our US-based audience. We got Sutat saying the Laureato movement is lagging behind today's standard. When it's a 3300, yes. When it's an 1800, I don't necessarily agree, especially on aesthetics. We got Eric Nielsen at the Rome AP store. They stand behind the locked door with no customers and laugh at you when you knock. It's funny, I saw the same thing in Zurich. There was no one in there and no one was being invited to join the party. What else is going on here? We got a comment from Mark S. at 39.7 millimeters. What is 39.7? That sounds like a 2998 Omega Speedmaster, but I could be wrong on that front. We got Jim Millett saying, hit that like, because it helps out Tim, which it certainly does. We got Aiken Watson joining in, David Houston. We got King V or maybe King the Fifth, saying I'm torn between the Chopard Alpine Eagle, XPS and 8HF, and the Parmigiani Fleury Tanda. Can you compare them? What do you think?
Not apples to apples. I think, you know, you're talking about a different aesthetic overall for sure. I find the Parmigiani really appealing to me personally. I think that the bracelet is a lot more streamlined in terms of its integration with the case. You have that very continuous angle through. I also have found it to be a really, really comfortable bracelet. I do think that the Alpine Eagle is a little bit more of a severe design, if that makes sense. It's noticeable more on the wrist. I'd go Parmigiani, but that's purely a personal preference.
On the basis of things that you often don't get with the Parmigiani Tandas, like lume and a large amount of water resistance, I would probably go with the Chopard. If you want a true peer-to-peer, something like a Tanda, assuming we're talking about the sports watches now, if we're talking about a Tanda sports watch and like an XPS 41, that's more of an equivalent, whereas the standard Alpine Eagle is definitely going to be punching in a price class that's below anything Parmigiani's selling, at least in the sporting category. IWC Ingenieur Automatic 40, $12,000, $300 standard, or the F1 the movie style. You can have that for $13,900. How do we feel about this? Because on the one hand, I like it a lot. On the other hand, I do realize you can get the same movement in a sub $4,000 Baume & Mercier.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say, and this was one of the big pushbacks that I remember when the watch was released initially. It's that price point. And, you know, you'd love to see this closer to, if not under 10,000, ideally. I think that IWC knows that this is going to be their entry. It is their entry into this same design category, integrated bracelet, heritage 70s style. And I do think, though, that they are asking a little bit too much for what the package are offering.
The good news, though, is on the secondary market. We've got our data right here. Making up no lies, you could see that that sub $10,000 price point does eventually reach the aftermarket. So this is looking really good for a watch with an 8-year warranty to now be available under $10,000 2 years after debuting. I feel pretty good about buying one of these pre-owned. Now, it's a great watch. It's anti-magnetic. It's water resistant to 100 meters, 80,000 ampere per meter. It's very slim. The bracelet feels expensive. In the hand, you don't suspect that it's worth less than what they're asking. It's just when you start cross-comparing Richemont family movements that you think, okay, well, I could have this caliber elsewhere. But on the other hand, it's a 5-day automatic. It's reasonably robust. IWC does build it in-house. Yeah. So there's a case to be made here. I think the F1, the movie one's kind of interesting.
Yep.
Probably the most interesting version of the watch, still steel, still a 40, but you know what? It's not the same watch from the movie.
Not exactly.
No, people ask, how do I get the movie watch? And my answer is first this, second, the movie watch is a prop. You can't actually get it.
Right.
So just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what if you've given up on the pursuit of a Nautilus 5711 or 5811? Where do we go from there?
So that's the question to end all questions, it seems like these days. I think a couple of the first ones that come to my mind would be a Czapek Antarctique. If you're looking for, I see a lot of similarities specifically in that polished center link in the bracelet. Not quite apples to apples again, but I think that it gives a lot of the same satisfaction on the wrist in terms of its look. I also think, also a popular watch, but not quite a hype watch in the same way, Moser Streamliner. Definitely taking a...
Streamliner center second, specifically.
Absolutely, yes. The Green Dragon, as they call it. It's taken definitely a different road in terms of design, but I think that it is not talked about enough for how comfortable it is, for how accessible it continues to be, and I think Moser's a brand that deserves a little bit more time under the sun.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm wearing today, so I got to agree with you. And mine has a green dial. I would also say right here, what you're looking at is the original from 2020. Now, there's two different levels. There's the most recent version, which is about 30,000 new, and then there are older versions, which could be as low as 18,000, 19,000. So you do have a little bit of a spread in the market depending on what your appetite is. The bracelet's up there as one of the all-time best. The only thing I really believe it lacks is a little bit of incremental adjustment in the clasp itself. But in terms of solidity, souplesse, the feel on the wrist, this is one of the best. And I really like the watch because it's not plagiaristic. You don't look at that and say, oh, that's a Nautilus or a 222 or a Laureato or a Royal Oak. It really does evoke the era without ripping it off.
There's no other watch that could be if you just look at the silhouette. I think that's a really nice, unique style.
We got a little bit of a bell, we got a little bit of Genta, we've got a little bit of Omega Speed Sonic chronograph, the lobster tail bracelet.
Good pull, yeah.
We got a little bit of maybe like a later Mark series chrono there, or an Oris Star. But one I really, really like from a brand that's friendly, approachable, and refreshingly unpretentious. We're going to jump back a little bit to the Vacheron Constantin overseas self-winding. This seems like the no-compromise alternative. Now you're getting a Holy Trinity sports watch that's arguably more sophisticated than a 5811.
You could argue that, absolutely. I think that you get an unprecedented level of versatility at the retail point, right? This watch comes with those additional straps. It also has
that's all one watch on the screen.
watch. You have one of the easiest quick release systems, I think. If you're swapping between that bracelet and those straps, you really are getting 3 watches for the price of one in terms of its versatility. You want to throw a tuxedo on, throw on that alligator strap. You could throw on the rubber for more casual outings.
And again, this is one of those watches with a really long warranty now at a Richemont Group, which is great because there's not a whole lot of depreciation. You can actually buy this new and not feel too bad. The $26,800 if you buy the steel watch, and that's with the silver, blue, or black dials, no questions about that. They sell for like 21 to 23 used. If we take like weird bubble markets like Japan, where they have their own kind of pricing logic. Outside of Japan, you generally see these for, at the low end, 21 to 23 fully intact on a bracelet. So you've got some options, but I would not discourage you from buying this new. I would also say the nice thing about the Czapek, which we didn't really get to and which we haven't really discussed, is that this one's got a great movement.
Yeah.
And you're going to find these at sub 20,000 used. This is a really cool piece. Emmanuel Boucher and Daniel Martinez. Boucher did the Harry Winston Opus 12. And this is a really great example of a Czapek that is movement oriented.
Absolutely. I think that, you look at the design with, aesthetically with those bridges. I love the variation of finishing. I'm also just personally in terms of, the look of a micro rotor movement, giving you the best of both worlds between being able to see architecture fully, but also having the convenience of automatic winding. I think they really hit it out of the park with this one.
And I love how they put on the rotor 100% recycled platinum, because who among us has not walked a beach in Bali and despaired at all of the trash platinum lying on the sand?
Exactly.
It's heartbreaking, it really is. Okay, jumping into the box now, we got lots of folks joining us. We got Mo-1231 saying integrated bracelets aren't going away anytime soon. People just don't go full suits anymore, and the acceptance of sports watches as dressy. Thanks, Rolex, at least in part. We got Aiken Watson saying, I've been my black overseas on the calf all week. We got Hannibal joining in, asking about Alexander Shurikov, who's actually in this episode in a wrist shot. And then we got David saying, wondering when the integrated bracelet watch sunsets. Are dress watches having a pushback moment, or is there a real inflection point here? I feel almost like the inflection is here. Like the integrated bracelet, like everyone who's coming out with one of these this year missed the boat.
I agree with you. I think that we've seen the rise and now we're starting to see the fall. I think that there are certain elements of the design. There are certain watches that are kind of trend proof, and as we've seen that. But I do think that everybody got in, and now everybody is starting to say, okay, we've been there, we've done that, and I think that they are moving on to other trends.
Yeah, I think if you're coming out with a green dial, a bronze case, or an integrated bracelet this year, you basically missed the boat by a lot.
By a couple years.
Okay, jumping into something that's a little bit more accessible, that Moser we talked about, 40 millimeters by 12 millimeters thick, really great alternative to something like a Nautilus. But if you want to go down market and get the bracelet and get the green dial and get all the fun and the features, Oris Pilot X.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, not the one with Kermit the Frog, although you can, but an affordable watch with a 10-year service interval, a 10-year warranty, an anti-magnetic movement, 100 meters water resistant, 39 millimeters in titanium, 5 days of power reserve. There's nothing not to like here.
I love this watch. I love talking about it. Weird, nerdy thing. It has one of my favorite actions on any clasp where you have that spring-loaded release where it says lift. It's just very satisfying to operate. Again, just as you mentioned, 5-day power reserve with a fully in-house movement for this price point. There's nothing not to love.
And you're absolutely right about that clasp being a highlight, and that's the exact opposite of what you expect on a sub $5,000. You expect everything to be great until you get to the clasp, and then you expect the cheapest off-the-shelf piece of junk. No way.
Right.
I mean, I'll say one of the weaknesses is something like the Alpine Eagle or the Louis Vuitton tambours that when you open the clasp, you see familiar off-the-shelf parts.
Absolutely.
This feels like a custom piece, and there's no compromise in the price. $4,800 for a 10-year warranty? Yes, please.
Absolutely.
Okay, Royal Oak Offshore. Admittedly, this watch hasn't had the same power over imaginations since the 2009 financial crisis. Still, as a Royal Oak, it is hard to avoid online. But let me recommend the Hublot Classic Fusion GT. Rare, genuine beauty from Hublot. Quarterbacked by Ferrari's own design department. A limited edition of 3, 100 meters, flyback chrono, in-house movement, Ferrari design input up and down, wore fantastically on my wrist. Don't believe the 45 millimeter rated measurement. And this is something you can get for 11 to 13K in titanium or 14 to 16 in carbon. By the way, I love this watch. Have you seen these?
I have yet to see one in the metal.
absolutely worth the price of admission. Now that you can get it used, I would even go so far as to say this is one of the best car watch co-brandings ever, and you don't have to love Ferrari to enjoy it. That's the carbon one.
Yeah.
JLC Master Compressor Extreme Lab 2, 30 to 35 grand, but if it said RM on the dial, multiply that by 20. How do we like this watch?
I think that it is a little derivative for me. I would say that
Of what?
I'm a big fan. This one in particular.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of, for me, Omega, a little bit of Zenith in there as well. I do think that the skeleton dial is executed really well. I'm a fan of integrated strap there, but it's not a watch that I have a lot of experience with.
Okay, I've got a lot of experience with it, and I could say that if you've got the budget and it has a recent service history, do not hold back. The only problem is its bigness. Get ready for 46 millimeters and expect to wear accordingly. Okay, now Vacheron, overseas chronograph, 27 to 30,000 used, 37,100 new. This is another one of those watches where I can say, because the price drop off is not tens of thousands of dollars or 50% of the value, you can buy this new and not feel too guilty, especially if you're going to keep it long term.
Absolutely. I think that it's, you're taking one of their flagship models and introducing a Panda dial to it. You're never going to go that wrong, I think. It's also one note about this generation of the overseas. It has probably one of my favorite micro adjustments in any bracelet.
The sleeved micro adjustment. Yeah.
Simply push if you want to make, push and pull if you want to make it bigger or smaller. I think it's really intuitive. And I think that, the design's a winner. You say and still have that integrated bracelet with the quick release. So.
All right, we got friends joining in the box. Michael G saying, I know it's less expensive, just got the new Christopher Ward C12 Loco. Definitely, we're big friends of Chris Ward here. We got the amazing Mr. Z saying, overseas on rubber is so good. Jim Millett, overseas, my current grail. And then we got Motogunner saying, I'd take the overseas over any other integrated sports watch. And we got Berkeley, California in the box. We got a reminder in the box, not from me, to upvote. I appreciate that. And then we have a comment from Sid Benjamin saying, I love a micro adjustment, so you're bang on right there. And then we got an offbeat suggestion for an Alongo Unzona Arcade. So if you're looking for a small form watch, that's definitely the answer. I'm not sure what hype watch that replaces, but we're always open to Longa here. And then we got Robert Vittori saying, I love the VC overseas, with Motogunner saying he loves his CW12. All right, so we're going to continue running the table now. HMC Streamliner Flyback. This watch came out in 2020. It was actually the first of the Streamliners, but note the ghosted logo. This is the new version that came out in 2023. It's actually a really cool watch with the Oceanograph, a powerhouse automatic caliber that has no case-back rotor, but is an automatic. And according to Jean-Marc Videresh, who designed the movement, it's made in Geneva. It would meet the Geneva Hallmark standards if they chose to submit it. So you're getting a lot of quality here. Great watch, $53,500 if you want to buy it new, around $30,000 pre-owned. I think it's a great value either way. Obviously, I'm a pre-owned groupie there, but everything you said about the watch before, definitely the case. Redolent to the era, but not derivative.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the most satisfying movements to look at. I get a similar level of kind of mechanical satisfaction when looking at a Lange or looking at, maybe, what's another brand that would give me the same type of it's escaping me, Netherlands, Grunfeld.
Oh yeah, the Grunfelds.
So
with the chronograph.
With the chronograph, yeah, I think that the finishing is amazing and a really interesting take on a modern sports chronograph. Yeah,
the nickel anthracite coating, that's how you know you're looking at the latest version of the watch. All right, we're jumping into our wrist shots. TAC visits St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. And that's just about all of the Vatican right there. With his Blancpain 50 Fathoms Bathscaphe flyback chronograph. Jeff S., longtime fan of the show. We talked about Alexander. Now there he is. Jeff sports his wild Alexander Shorokov full calendar Katamomo black. Stephen E. makes me jealous. He's in the box now. He's on your screen. With an all-time personal favorite of mine, the boutique edition gradient dial El Primero Captain Windsor annual calendar. Norm M. takes his Grand Seiko white birch for sizing at Hyde Park, which is now the 1916 company. Thank you for trusting our extended family. Abdul R. travels to Orlando with his Fortis Marine Master B42 Altair edition, looking good. And Andre Z. shares his Panerai Luminor Bitampo Lunarosa as shadows grow long. I think the shadow might be the only thing I can think of that has length and width, but no physical height at all. Okay, guys, send your shouts to Monday Mailbag at the1916company.com to see your pieces on these pixels. Alternatives to hype watches. There are some watches that are so famous we really don't need to mention them. and we may not be allowed to. But that doesn't mean we can't allied them and suggest robust alternatives. So a fine motorsports chronograph can be sourced easily enough if you want something that you can buy and own right now, and I can't imagine what this is an alternative to. But how about the Omega Speedmaster Ed White, the caliber 321? How do we feel about this watch?
I think it was a really winning reinterpretation, or essentially reissue of that famous watch. I think the proportion's a little bit slimmer than your classic professional moon watch. You have no crown guards. You're harking back to that pre-professional era of the Speedmaster. I think reviving the 321 movement as well was obviously really popular.
How do you feel about the one watch, one watchmaker ethic behind this?
Well, it definitely doesn't help in terms of delivering as many as we can.
But that is a hard discussion we have to have.
Hard discussion to have, of course. I do think that it preserves the romance of what this watch stands for. You're hearkening back to a time when the entire brand was a lot smaller and a lot more hand-finished and handmade, and I think it's very cool to know that they are treating this watch with the proper level of reverence.
Yeah, and I think the market's responded. At $16,200, it's priced very close to another famous chronograph. But most folks will argue that given the wait list and the quality you get, reasonable. Okay, JLC Master Compressor Chronograph, don't want to dwell on this for too long, but for $6,000 to $8,000 you can get the full bracelet version. That's getting into handmade watches, that's getting into horlogerie, it's getting into a manufactured movement JLC, and it has what might be one of the best bracelets ever made. So if you can find the Master Compressor Chronograph on the bracelet, $6,000 to $8,000, good deal. Zenith Chronomaster Sport, $11,800. This is a watch that probably looks a little bit too famous for its own good. It was quite controversial when it came out. How do you feel about this one today? Has it earned its salt?
I think that it's definitely starting to earn a good place within modern chronographs. You're taking that original 38mm size, adding a ceramic bezel. You're essentially taking that Chronomaster original, updating it for modern tastes. I think that it is quite satisfying on the wrist. I think that the ceramic bezel, while not necessary, definitely makes that tachometer a lot more legible and gives the watch a little bit more wrist presence.
Also, people have, for better or worse, said this looks a lot like a more famous chronograph. Well, I was at Luxury in Geneva in 2022, and the folks from Zenith were telling us they were basically getting rhetorical high fives from the people who make that famous chronograph, so it's well loved. What else going on in the box? We got local hero Ed, Captain Windsor Zenith shot wins for me. We got OT saying the Captain Windsor Palladium dial is great, and I got to agree. P. Rao joining in, we're glad to have him. Moto Gunner loves the flat link bracelet on the Ed White, and we got Yakin is me saying speedy dark side of the moon with rocket hand for him. David Remus saying, I keep forgetting about the new time. Yes, we're at 4 p.m. U.S. Eastern now. Please don't miss us. We're going to try to get more of Europe by airing a little bit earlier. Jim Mild saying, I'm waiting for the 321 in a standard steel moon watch. You and me both. I'm actually waiting for it in a dark side of the moon ceramic case. So the day that happens, I may be a buyer. And we have a question, is the 321 dimensionally similar to the FOIS? Yes, it should be exactly the same. It should be the 39.7mm case. All right, jumping into our alternatives to famous motorsports chronographs. By the way, you can also get that Zenith in green. Do we like it better in green, black, or in white?
I personally am not a big fan of the green, and that's just me. I'm a big fan of the black dial. If I had to choose personally, I think with that ceramic bezel, I think it works really well.
Okay, I see that. There is a green dial that's Aaron Rodgers themed, guys.
Right.
I don't need to tell you what to think about that, but I like this green version a lot better. Zinn R500. Zinn, helmet Zinn. He's known as a pilot, but he was also a race car driver during the 1950s. And this is a 300-piece grade 5 titanium lugless bullhead limited edition from a few years back, and it is the most focused motorsports chrono Zinn ever made. So you've got a power reserve indicator, you've got a 7750 base bullhead style winding in operation. I just dig this all over. They're about 5,000 used, they made 300. If you can find one, game on. This is a fun watch.
Totally agree. I think Zinn is just so hard to find qualms with at their price point, with the detail that they go into. Huge fan of a bullhead too. So fun. Okay,
how about alternatives to a famous GMT watch for aviation enthusiasts? Well, sometimes the call comes from inside the house. Tudor Black Bay 58 GMT, I am all about it. 39mm, 65-hour reserve, master chronometer, in-house caliber, 200 meter, $4,900. Nomos Club World Timer. Have you seen this one? 40 by 10 millimeters hybrid world time?
Yep.
$4,720. How do you like this?
I think that it is a nice alternative to other famous GMT watches because it's not trying to be something else. I think that frankly it's a pretty unique aesthetic as far as GMTs go, world timers go.
A world time dual time hybrid almost.
Yeah, absolutely. So functionally it's pretty unique as well.
And the sleeper hit of our Watches and Wonders videos, this was by far the most viewed watch. Okay, moving on from Nomos to a company we hardly ever talk about, Fortis. Yes, they still exist. Fortis Vagabond GMT. You've got Tudor power on the inside, a 40mm case, a chronometer certification, a steel carapace and bracelet, 200 meters water resistant, $6,800. Lovely watches with several dial options. I know I said that people coming out with integrated bracelet watches recently have been missing the boat. I'm not sure this is an integrated bracelet watch, but it's a really good looking one.
Agreed. You have a great cushion style case, very 70s, very fun. And again, I don't think it's trying to be anything that it's not. I think that its priority is to have fun with its design, to give you something funky on the wrist, while not compromising on that GMT functionality. So yeah, I think it's a win.
I think that's a lot of fun and good value from Fortis. We love Fortis, we just don't mention them enough. Okay, so, but those are all Lux or entry Lux. What about the high end? So let's talk about the Generation 2 overseas dual time. This is a watch that you can now get for well under $20,000 and available all day long for the aftermarket price of a famous GMT. We're talking JLC Power and Holy Trinity hardware. This is a blue blood for very reasonable money given what it is.
One of the best value, I mean, if we're truly talking dollar for dollar, I think it's one of the best values out there, certainly within the realm of GMT travel time watches. Obviously, Holy Trinity pedigree is worth a lot. I think that the design continues to be relevant. I mean, obviously the Gen 3 was not all that different purely off of aesthetic. So great value. Love this one.
I would say that the Gen 3 bracelet has more features, but for intricacy and feel, this was the best overseas bracelet, and I still believe that. So if you can get one of these for 17 grand, full box and paper, guys, go for it. All right, now, I'm sure we can suggest alternatives if you're burned out by dive watch hype. And Omega's Diver 300 meter remains the clear choice here. Now with a mesh bracelet as a regular offering, they've really evolved the look to be a little bit more retro in the last 2 years.
I agree. Yeah, we saw the mesh, to my knowledge, first time on the No Time to Die in titanium, and people from the start were asking for this in steel on a more normal production watch, and it gives it a little bit more of a vintage aesthetic, I think. And let's just say, I think that it's fair to say the classic, Diver 300 bracelet is somewhat divisive.
Yeah, it's a hybrid of a dress and a sports bracelet, so I agree with you there.
No, I love the mesh. I think they did well with that.
Yeah, and this is not a Bond edition. It's inspired by the Bond edition. This is regular production, and you can see they've gone back to an aluminum bezel insert to give it more of a vintage feel. What you can't see in the picture is that they've also gone to sort of a bubble sapphire that looks more like a plexi, and for once they've sort of ditched their ceramic dials. This one's actually made of aluminum too, so a lot of interesting things happening here. Calibre de Cartier, long gone, but revered for its assembly quality, its ergonomics, its thinness, its quality as an ISO 6425 certified diver. Cartier went all out with this, the rose gold version and the blue version. I like them all, great values today. The lume was very memorable on this. I thought this was probably the most underrated diver of the 2010s. And frankly, the Blancpain 5008 is the 50 fathoms you probably forgot. They're not cheap, even used. But at 40.8 millimeters, 300 meters rated, 100-hour movement, and limited edition for almost every version of it, there's value here for those who want something finer than a famous dive watch. You like the 50?
I do. I mean, the heritage is there. I mean, arguably predates the Submariner, I've heard.
Yeah, no one really knows.
Depending on who you talk to.
Periscope doesn't think so.
But yeah. So
I'm actually going to reach out to Blancpain and ask them to formally respond to that. Okay, wrist shots number 3. James W. captures a spectacular moment with the Sydney Opera House and Omega Seamaster. Speak of the devil. Danny Kaye and his Tudor Black Bay chronograph take in the water, or water jousting, I should say, and set in the south of France. I guess pikes up. I don't even know how that works. Kirk K. Or I should say Matt R. First features a few of my favorite things with JLC Master Compressor Dual-Matic and an Audi, and the talking time with Tim Masso Timeout hat. We have Kirk K. now, who went all out on toppings with yellow gold and a fully loaded pizza to go with his Submariner. And Carrie B brings a rival Black Bay wrist chat from Illinois on Lake Crystal. That might be the best pure photo of the day. Guys, send your wrist chats in Monday mailbag at the1916company.com. Okay, alternatives to hype watches. There aren't many dress watches on the hype train, I gotta be honest here. But there is one that unarguably belongs, at the very least, ahead of the caboose, because this one has been probably the first and only real hype dress watch. Vacheron Chronomètre Bleu, originally launched in 2009 as a more accessible entry-level model, the CB now approaches Nautilus levels of price premiums, even as the original retail price continues to climb. So, how does your least expensive watch become your most in-demand watch?
A design that's nothing short of iconic with that blue dial, tantalum case. You know, this is not a material that you see every day.
True.
I think that there is something very romantic to the idea of a true time-only watch as well. I think that it sort of embodies the whimsy that Journe is really well known for in his designs. But it's really fascinating, the life this has taken on.
Yeah, really cool watch and a fun one. The tantalum and the blue dial, and here's the secret. The underside of that dial, like below the clear lacquer or the translucent lacquer, the underside of that dial is black polished German silver. Okay, so now alternatives. Speaking of German silver, why take a little when you can get a lot? A Lange und Söhne Saxonia thin copper blue. Photos don't do it justice, but 39 millimeters by 6.5 thick, 3-day manual wine reserve, a rare Lange that's more fun on the dial side. 25 grand used. I have no idea how that happens. Next one, this one's right up your alley, August. Okay, Crador
Yes.
H2 GBLT 997. This is the 2020 one with the blue porcelain dial. It's got the power to burn your wallet and a dial and movement to match. Around 50K used. Is that a crime? This should be like a $100,000 watch.
I agree with you, and it's if we're truly taking things at face value, this should be at the same premiums, if not more, than a CV. But I think that there are some really fun reminders. The level of hand craftsmanship with the dial, the way that they've left, the shades of the porcelain to be lighter at the edges, and that is very intentional as a reminder that this is an organic material, that this is something that is never quite the same way twice, right? And the level of finishing from Seiko to Grand Seiko to Credor, continues to be best in class, I would argue.
39 millimeters in platinum, a few dozen, because it's the micro artist studios, just a few dozen of the years per year. As good as anything from the Valet du Jeu, but proudly Japanese. We love this one. Debatoon DB25 Stradivarius. Now these used are around 70 to 80K in titanium. I used Sotheby's photo because even though we own the brand, their photo's better than ours. But 42 titanium manual line, 6 days, customizable dial. It can be any starscape, any place on any night in history. A lot of fun, and I think sort of overlooked. I think this is almost like the thinking man's Chronomètre Bleu. And Czapek, this is one that came out this year. One of my favorites of the year, the Czapek Promenade Goutte d'Eau. So basically a ripple in enamel on a steel case that's 38 millimeters, 100 pieces, so it's a limited edition, and it's got a movement to match at 20,600. It's got the same movement from the Antarctique.
This is a really mesmerizing dial. I've yet to see one in the metal, of course, but from the photos I've seen, it is truly hypnotic. I mean, the depth they're able to get out of that finish is amazing.
And that you can get the Czapek Antarctique movement with a beautiful dress watch dial that's a
Absolutely.
craft art. We've seen enamel that's solid colors. Okay, that's fine. That can be done on, a Seiko. But when you've got enamel this nuanced, it's a work of art.
I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Jumping in, we got Curtis Arndt, former naval aviator and watch collector and Austin Healey aficionado. Joining in from San Diego, we got Sean Hansen, we got Felton joining in, and we got a comment, Periscope knows not of which he speaks in regard to his impugning the 1953 origin of the 50 Fathoms. Like I said, I'm going to ask Blancpain to respond to this and see how they do it. We got Amit joining in. Tim, did you see the trailer for the new Bond video game? No, I didn't, but tell me all about it. And then what else is going on in the box? We got Johnny P saying Pelagos is greater than a Seamaster. It may be, in your heart. Pocket Watch Time, Khalib Decardier, he's a fan. And we have another comment. Don't forget to like the video. You said so, not I. We have Lawrence saying, not super keen on scratching. Well, that's why we go with ceramic. We had a question, what's the alternative to RM? I would say the recent high-end, like Roger Dubuis, that's why they are the way they are. They're going for RM. JLC Master Compressor Extreme Lab 2, a bunch of Grubel 4Cs, and if you want to go back to like the Glasuta Original Sport Evo Impact, where you could have a sport tourbillon that's swimmable and loomed and shock resistant. Hard to find, but worth your while. Did I miss anything?
Grubel's the main one front of mind for me, absolutely.
Yeah. If you're less interested in the durability side of things, I can also see an Urwerk squeezing its way into that equation. Like that's not going to be something you're going to swim with, but if you want that super technical, crazy watch aesthetic, an Urwerk will give you that.
AP with their concepts sometimes have a similar sort of very hyper-technical feel.
And I would say that's a great comparison because the high-end RMs, the really interesting ones, are made by AP or APRP. The high-end branch of AP makes the high-end RMs and also the Royal Oak concepts. So I think that's a perfect example. Why satisfy yourself with the knockoff when you can have the real thing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And then we have a question, what's going on top of the smart car? Okay, so I have this little parking lot of my 1/18 scale models back here, and they're all 1/18 scale, so I wanted to show that a true-to-life sized smart car fits on a true-to-life scale Hummer, so that would work in full size too. So I didn't have a place to park the smart car, so I parked it on top of the Hummer. And I bet you the real Hummer could support its weight. Okay, jumping into the viewer wrist shots, we got Jan, who impresses with his Constantin Chaikin Baron's Joker Ace of Spades. Gary S. from Scottsdale keeps 2 times with his Glycine Airman, the Chief Edition in British Racing Green. Bernard overlooks Osaka, Japan with his 1916 sourced Omega Speedmaster 321 Ed White. Thank you for trusting our company, Bernard. Neil B. rolls in a British car with a Zeppelin watch. Perhaps he was listening to Led Zeppelin. Wasim R. takes us home with the mighty Breguet Type 22 and Mila the dog. All right, we're going to talk about some watches here. Tell me what you think about this isn't watches tonight without watches, so we're ending on a high. We got a perpetual calendar, one of my dream watches, inline calendar, gradient dial, brushed steel-like finish. Tell me all about the 5236P.
Well, I think that it's a design that's very condensed. I really appreciate how they're taking a complication in a perpetual calendar that's normally associated with being quite complicated in its aesthetic.
Like hard to read, too.
Yeah, and a lot of information. And I think that this is taking all that information and displaying it in such a condensed format that it retains a level of simplicity in its aesthetic that's rare for a perpetual calendar. Dimensions are all incredibly wearable. I think that the vertical brushing on the dial is really satisfying, especially when you get that pop in certain light conditions. And grand complication from Patek is always going to be a keystone in any good collection. Finishing speaks for itself. The Côte de Genève is really the shining star there.
And on these 31-260s, you get this nice broad striping, which I really like, these super broad, super shaded stripes. Another thing I like here is that there's this finger train leading down to the escapement, and this is not a 240, this is a new generation micro rotor. It's 34 millimeters in diameter. We also have Breguet, and I feel like in a world where too many things are hyped, Breguet, if anything, doesn't get enough credit as a modern company.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that it's hard to overstate this, the role that Breguet has played in watchmaking history, as we all know. You're looking at, freehand engraving, if I'm not mistaken, Tim, on the movement there. You're looking at something that's never the same way twice. This is truly handmade, hand finished. And I think that just as you said, for the value that these watches present, certainly on the secondary market, it can be hard to believe what you can get for similar prices of watches that can't hold a candle to them in terms of horological significance, in terms of level of finishing, in terms of craftsmanship.
Yeah, I mean, you got a hand-cut guilloche dial made out of solid gold. You got a cold-rolled, hand-finished case. You got a freehand engraved movement. You've got a tourbillon, and it's all 39 millimeters. This watch is not as big as it looks. It's only about 47 lug to lug. And we're going to end on a high note. Well, the highest of highs. You went to Schaffhausen. You saw Moser. You saw this hairspring being made. Tell me about it. So
cylindrical hairspring, Moser, first of all, one of only a handful of companies in the world that actually produces hairsprings, and they do that for lots of other brands. The cylindrical tourbillon is a very unique thing. So you have a cylindrical hairspring, a single overcoil there. I'm also a really big fan of the dial on this watch, using the a miniaturized version of that gradient, almost fume finish that Moser is really well known for at this point. And then maybe my favorite little detail of the watch is the height and depth you get on the indexes for your hours, made out of Globalite, which is a ceramic luminescent material that Moser is well known for using. I love how, sort of as I mentioned earlier, telling you the time of day is almost an afterthought with this watch. It is a mechanical sculpture and that I just think is gorgeous to look at and very intriguing.
Yeah, Moser making that cylindrical hairspring. Obviously, John Arnold invented the original, but in the modern era, if you want a cylindrical hairspring, you don't have a whole lot of options, and Moser actually makes hairsprings, which is very cool. We had a question, how thick is the Moser? If you want to know every single dimension for this watch, you definitely want to go out and check out my review of it, but it's a 42.8 millimeter case. It's about 51 lug to lug, and I believe it's about 16 millimeters thick. So those are the approximate dimensions. And I had a question from Why Not Adrian. Tim, why do you hide De Bethune serial numbers? Just whenever we have a watch that's a small community and sensitive and we want to afford some level of privacy to the previous owner, that's generally why we're going to mask serial numbers. We're not afraid that you're going to make your own Stradivarius with a real serial number. If you're that talented, you should be working for De Bethune. All right, guys, Watch is live. We'll be back 4 p.m. next Friday. If they want to find you, how do they reach out?
So you could reach out to my email, abenjamin@the1916company.com, and I'd be happy to help out in any way I could.
And to one and all who made August's first appearance on our channel possible and a smooth ride, thanks so much. This guy is a watch, basically, I would say he's a watch savant in a way I never can be, because his first job out of college was in watches. I waited a decade, so he's a decade ahead of me. Thanks to one
Still
and all.
got a ways to catch up.
That's all right. I'll be dead. And then we got Garrett on the switcher. Thanks to everyone. Time out.